Welcome to Bass Talk with Hagen and Hayes. This is Series 4, and what's today's subject, Susan?
Today's subject is our first bass teacher.
How exciting. Tell me about your first bass teacher.
Well, my first bass teacher was actually my dad. And he had played electric bass and double bass. And he'd played in a band and he'd played in some local orchestras and things like that. So he got me started and it was really fun. I loved studying with him. But at a certain point, he said, I think you need a different teacher. He wanted to make sure, things were on the right track. So I went to a violin teacher whose name was Alan Harlick. And he's still alive. He was both of my sister's violin teacher. And he had learned how to teach all string instruments. And he helped me get into my first youth orchestra. Then I went to my first youth orchestra sort of sleepaway 2-week summer camp. And I met a woman named Mary. At the time it was Newton, but now her last name is Olds. And she lived outside the Boston area. And I loved her. She was nice. She was very quiet, very supportive, and very knowledgeable about things like posture and how to hold the bass and the bow in a comfortable manner. I had started as a German bow player because that's what my dad played. But when I met this woman at youth orchestra camp, I was like, oh my gosh, I have to study with her. I love her. And she said to me, I only know how to play French bow, so you would have to switch. And I agreed. I mean, I wasn't that committed to anything at that point. So I switched to French bow. And a few months into our lessons, she said to me, this is wonderful because every few weeks I go and I study one lesson with Ed Barker, who was the principal bass player of the Boston Symphony Orchestra. And she said, and then over the next several weeks, I teach you what he taught me. So it was sort of like I was studying with Ed Barker as a kid through her. So when I actually went to college and started studying with Ed, he was really surprised I had a lot of his technique already sort of in my playing, which was super cool. But I felt really lucky. She was so nice and the absolute perfect first actively bass playing bass teacher that I ever had. Now, how about you?
My first bass teacher was at school. We had music lessons at school,
Nice.
and all the lessons were free. And I think I was late 13 or 14, and there was a notice in assembly saying free lessons, and I think it's for double bass and bassoon. So I went to a meeting at break time, and I just signed up for double bass lessons. And I don't know why. I'm not sure if I'd ever even heard of bass, but I signed up. And my first bass teacher was he taught both cello and bass. He was a cellist who taught bass as well. A man called David Higginbottom. And we're still in contact all these years later.
That's so nice.
And he was such a lovely teacher. He was so nice, so enthusiastic, and so encouraging, and so positive. And it's only later in life, as I got to know him, within the last few years, I discovered I was his very first double bass student. He'd been to teacher training college with someone who became my second bass teacher, and I was his first student. So he was almost like he was one lesson ahead of me. He was nice, but he was lovely. And I remember, I used to run to lessons. I was so excited, and he was always really happy with what I did, and he tried to find nice music for me. But at the time, there was very little music. It was a different time. This was about 1974. But he was such a nice teacher and a nice communicator, and he really got me started. He gave me a good start.
I love that.
So what did you do from you had your first teacher, it was your dad,
Yes.
and then you moved on?
Yep, I moved on to the violinist, then I moved on to Mary, and I was Mary's first teacher. No, student. I was her first student, and I think that was part of what I loved about her too. Is she was one step ahead of me, but she hadn't done this 1,000 times yet. Then she got a divorce and moved to Chicago, and remarried when she moved to Chicago. But when she left, it broke my heart. I was going into my junior year of high school, and I didn't know what to do. And so before she left, she had maybe 3 or 4 students by the time she was moving. And she passed us all on to a young woman who had just moved to Boston, who had gone to Curtis, who had come from the Paris Conservatory, Pascal Delache Feldman. And she was very enthusiastic and also a very stellar player. I always felt she was really a soloist type
Mm.
of a player. And that was great because I'd really never done much of that at all. And she helped prepare me for a concerto competition my senior year of high school. And oh, she was encouraging and kind and supportive. And I had had some health issues. I'd had major surgery the summer before my last year of high school. And she came and visited me and she brought me a stack of, yes, I'm dating myself, compact discs that were recordings of bass players from France and um, the Orchestra of Contrabasses from France as well, and even Ray Brown and people I'd never really heard of and listened to. She really expanded my horizons, and she helped me win that concerto competition, which gave me a full scholarship to college, which was
Yeah.
just such a gift. And she was, again, I was really lucky. She was kind and loving and supportive, and I really lucked out. And then I went to college and studied with a series of, basically with Ed Barker the whole time, but I would take outside lessons with some of the other Boston Symphony players. Now, what did you do after David Higginbottom?
Well, I went to his teacher, who was a man called Lawrence Gray, again, who I'm still in contact with.
Yes.
And Lawrence, he taught in lots of schools locally, but I think he liked my lessons because I could play all the repertoire he wanted to play
Yeah.
and wanted to teach. So he introduced me to things like the Nanny Concerto and the all lots of pieces like this, music by Pododovsky and Boffini, and it was really nice. But I think David, my very first teacher, he really started me, and he really gave me the tools to start discovering for myself
Mhm.
what I wanted to do as a bass player, how I wanted to be what the career I wanted. And he was great. And I think sometimes your first teacher can have such a big impact,
Oh,
even
yes.
though they're often not the most famous of your teachers, but often they really help you get started, and they really give you a good grounding
Yeah.
for where you decide you want to be and how you want to progress. So I'm eternally grateful to him. And we went down to see him just before we moved to Cambridgeshire, and he's lovely. His lovely wife, Yvonne, who's a singer, and they're just such lovely company. And it's so nice to get to know him as an adult.
That's so
Um,
spectacular.
I can remember when I was having lessons with him, I thought he was really old. Uh, I was only 13 or 14. I realized he was only 10 years older than me.
Right.
But at
Yes.
14, anybody who's older than about 16 or 17 is ancient.
Of course, and when they're an authority on something, they seem even older. I
Exactly.
realized that about my first two teachers too, in addition to my dad, but my first two bass, professional playing teachers, Mary and Pascal, they were both probably in their early to mid 20s when I started studying with them. But yeah, again, I was like maybe 10 or 11 when I met Mary, and I must have been about 16 when I met Pascal. They just seemed so adult that I just assumed they were old. And now I'm in touch with both of them. And I'm like, yeah, you're really not that much older than I am. It's amazing. But I love how our first teachers really do have such a profound impact on who we become. And I don't think we always know that as kids or when you're just starting out. That you just,
No, I don't think you do, and it's something I try and teach my students.
yeah,
It's like figures in the bass world, composers and teachers. Everybody's has an impact, some greater than others, but everybody made some difference to help us get where we are today.
yeah,
And every student has had one or two teachers before they come to me who've all made a difference. They've helped them get to that stage, and it's my job to get them further and progress to where
yes.
again where they want to go. And it's amazing how the influence you can have as a teacher. But that very first one really gives you something extra because you before you had lessons with them, you weren't a bass player.
Right. It's true. They're so transformative and important in our lives. It's great. And I think it's nice to get to talk about them and pay a little homage to them.
It is. It is.
This was a nice topic. Good choice. So thank you everybody for listening to season 4 of Bass Talk with Hagen and Hayes. Like and subscribe, and we will see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.